Now, when it comes to using external data, that is making an API call, fetching that data in advance, that data is coming from some sort of an external data source. Then we do need to make sure that we need to implement a special function. Now, that special function is called getStaticProps. Let's take a look. Now, in getStaticProps, we need to essentially invoke that data. We need to give it the data that it can expose. And once that data gets exposed via this function, then you can access that data within the component via props. And that's why the name static props. It's getting the static data as props into the component. Alright. Now, just like pages have their rules, for example, in pages directory, any page that we look at, we do need to make sure that we are exporting them by default, and it needs to be a React component. Similarly, getStaticProps also have a couple of rules. Let's take a look at those rules before going ahead and implementing it. Now, in getStaticProps, the rules are that it can only be exported from a page file, and it's meant for all routes. And what that means is, if it's a page, then only we can export a function called getStaticProps, and then only then Next.js will recognize that as a way to pre-render content. The second rule is that it is essentially for all the route pages itself. So it definitely needs to be a page file, and we need to export it from that page file as well. So let's go ahead and export that function. Now, in the home page, what we are going to do is we are going to use coffee stores as that external data source. We are going to pre-render this specific content, pass it on to getStaticProps, and let's see how all that works. This coffeestore.json would be something that we will eventually invoke an API request for. But for now, let's use this as our data source. So in order to implement getStaticProps, if we take a look at the documentation, you will notice that this is exactly what we need to do. So let's copy that code and go back. Now here, let's paste it. Now what this context is, we'll take a look at later on. But for now, let's go ahead and call our data source. So we can either just do this, or rather we can just pass it in here. So we are importing the coffee stores right here, and we are passing it down right here. Now, ideally what we would do is we would say data equals, and this is where we would basically making that fetch API request to get the coffee stores, right? But in our case, since we already have the coffee stores on the file system, we can just directly call it. And remember, this syntax, just because the key and the value are exactly the same, we can just declare it just like this. We don't have to repeat it like that, but we can just say this, and this would imply that coffee stores is the key and coffee stores is the value, and the value would be referencing this value. All right. Now that we have done that, let's go ahead and pass it to our component. Now, just because we call this coffee stores right here, and this is where we would access our properties of the component, we can just console log it right here, just to see what props look like. Like that. Now, let's go to a browser and check it out. Now, over here, since this is where we are trying to pre-render the content, let's refresh the page. And let's open up our DevTools. And we do have some other error, that is each child in a list should have a unique key prop. Okay, this is unrelated, but we can easily fix that up as well over here. Just because we are rendering multiple card elements, but we are not passing in as key, we just need to pass it as key. So we can say coffeestore.id, because in our JSON file, right here, ID is unique. Clear the console, refresh the page again, and that error is gone. All right, now our terminal, our console is looking a lot better. So let's take a look at the props. And you can see that the props are actually printed and they have coffee stores. And if you open up the object, it's exactly this area of objects that we have in the JSON file. So that's how we implement get static props. So this specific coffee stores file is going to get pre-rendered and it's getting passed to the component itself. So now you will notice here that coffee store is the name of the default import, and coffee stores is also the name of the props from get static props. And right now we are referencing coffee stores from our import. So let's change that to coffee stores from our get static props, and let's see if that works. And let's save it. Going back, and it still works. And you can see that this specific content is essentially pre-rendered. So that's all for get static props. I'll see you in the next one.